They're able to expand the ionic energy. That's amazing!
Your mind will never recover.
I'll risk it.
I wouldn't if I were you.
Think what I could do with molecular manipulation. Turn the moon into a green energy battery.
Well, the 7 billion other people on this planet aren't going to fare any better.
Regrettably.
Face your annihilation, Spider-Man!
And from bad to worse.
Simon, oh man, what happened to you?
These two faced off in Wolverine Volume 3, Issue 31 during the Enemy of the State story arc. We're talking about Gorgon and Wolverine. Now, Gorgon is known for being a fearsome villain who can, as his codename implies, turn his enemies to stone with just one simple little glance. In fact, Gorgon has actually successfully killed Wolverine before. That's just how even of a match this was going into it. He then had Wolverine resurrected and brainwashed him so that he might use him as his own assassin, turning him against his friends and colleagues in the hero community. I hate when that happens. In the end though, Wolverine got him back. During their fight in issue number 31, Wolverine seems to take a page out of Perseus's book. He defeats Gorgon using his own claws to reflect his own gaze back onto himself. Genius. Turning Gorgon into stone before then shattering him into a million pieces. You're not coming back from that easy.
The villain known as Mr. Mxyzptlk is technically a bad guy, but he's more just a reality warping nuisance for the Man of Steel, and he absolutely did not deserve what happened to him in Superman Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. In the story, a wide array of Superman's villains all make their play on the Man of Steel, and after he naturally defeats everyone, he is still left wondering who organized all these ne'er-do-wells. Turns out it was Mr. Mxyzptlk. Mr. Mix reveals himself and goes on a villain monologue about how basically he has lived for a long time and he's kind of bored of being mischievous, so now he wants to be evil, and his first evil act will be taking out Superman himself. The fifth dimensional imp then reveals his monstrous true form and goes on the attack. Now luckily for Supes, he grabbed the Phantom Zone projector and he used it on the villain, but at the same time, trying to escape, Mr. Mix spoke his name backwards. With both things happening at the same time, Mxyzptlk was completely torn in half between both the Phantom Zone and the fifth dimension.
This one was a disturbing, heart-wrenching, and shocking moment from season 1 of Peacemaker, a series that surprised me in so many ways, and in so many of them delightful ones. One such startling moment happens when Peacemaker is forced to face off against his dad, White Dragon. While we know pretty early on that Peacemaker's dad, Augie Smith, is pretty much the worst role model or parent anyone could ask for, we also see that Chris Smith, aka Peacemaker, still cares deeply for his father, despite all the awful things his dad has done to him. Rather than rightfully blame his father for his messed up upbringing, Chris seems to just blame himself almost just as much, if not actually more, making the moment when he actually faces his father a tense one. Years of pent-up rage, disappointment, shame, and frustration manifest in a single instant when White Dragon goads his son into killing him, commenting on the fact that he doesn't believe his son is in essence strong enough to even do so, and in the process causing Peacemaker to snap, resulting in him doing just that, killing his own supervillain father.
Rudolph Jones found himself exposed to a strange form of radiation which changed him into the bald, green-skinned Parasite with the ability to absorb the life and energy of others. In Firestorm, the Nuclear Man, issue number 86, Parasite is released from an area he is being held in and goes on a rampage, draining multiple people of their life energy, including Firehawk, who fell pretty easily to this villain. Now luckily the hero Firestorm is nearby. At this point in time, Firestorm has become the world's fire elemental and received a pretty significant power boost. Firestorm comes in hot literally on Parasite with a blast of flame, and then when Parasite tries to drain Firestorm's power, the hero is completely unaffected. He delivers this cold line about how he himself is just straight up power incarnate, and in a desperate effort, Parasite tries to trade energy blasts with Firestorm. Unfortunately for Parasite, it is nowhere near an equal fight. He uses up all the energy he took, and then just trying to hold back Firestorm's blasts, Parasite goes through his own reserved energy as well, to the point that he is on the brink. He even starts to beg Firestorm to stop, but he had every intention of taking Parasite's life until his friends show up and pull him back. It's actually a really dark dark scene.
In issue 116 of Spectacular Spider-Man, Peter crosses paths with, get this, Sabertooth, when he shows up to attack Black Cat, who had just escaped the Foreigner's clutches. Sabertooth was sent to make her pay, and while Felicia doesn't seem to be too afraid of Sabertooth's threats to skin her alive, Spider-Man returns just as Victor is set to pounce. The two tussle and Peter leaves Victor crying out when he shoots him in the face with webbing. Victor rips it off his face, in the process doing damage with his own claws, even though Peter tried to warn him to not do that, proving that not only is Spider-Man stronger than Sabertooth this time around, but he also seems to be quite a bit smarter here too.
In Spawn number 27, we learn of Philip Kron, who has spent his entire life studying the occult so that one day he could gain access to heaven. Now, I'm not really sure that's how that works, but either way. Calling himself the Curse, Philip decided the best thing to do in his heavenly endeavor would be to bring down the Hellspawn Al Simmons. Now, Spawn was an agent of heaven at that point and was imbued with mystical energy, which Philip would then siphon off for himself. But because he is clearly no match for Spawn, Philip goes with a complete sneak attack on Simmons, blowing a hole clear through Spawn's chest. Unsurprisingly, Spawn wasn't especially pleased about being ambushed, so he tracks down the Curse and blasts off his bionic arm. The two then engaged in a battle, but since Spawn was at full power and the Curse was just a crazy guy in a costume, he didn't really last very long at all. Spawn beat the absolute beans out of the Curse and then strung up his almost lifeless body against the wall in an alleyway to ward off any further enemies. That would have resulted in Philip's passing, but his fate was somehow even worse later on. You'll have to read for that one.
This one is truly brutal and devastating for me because, in a way, Starro was quite a misguided villain. In James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, Starro is cast in the role of antagonist, but Starro is not malicious here per se, or at least not malicious without cause, let's just say that. Starro is an alien who was captured and used for various experiments as part of Project Starfish. The Suicide Squad has been sent in to shut down said project after the United States learned of how dangerous the project could be if unleashed on the entire world. When the team finally uncover the truth behind Project Starfish, it's too late and they accidentally unleash the captive, mind-controlling cosmic being, Starro, on the world. Amanda Waller is surprisingly fine with this, as it will destabilize Corto Maltese, which actually benefits the US. However, the squad decide to rebel against Waller and take on Starro anyways, because they're like, we should save these people, a lot of these people are innocents. Thanks to a combination of commitment and luck, they manage to defeat Starro, but as Starro and all their offspring lay dying, Starro broadcasts their last thoughts, reminiscing on what their life was like prior to being taken captive on Earth. I was happy, floating, staring at the stars.
Okay, so spoilers for The Boys comic book series, which finished in 2012, so you've had over 10 years to get caught up. What was arguably the biggest twist of the comic came near the end of the story, in issue number 65 specifically. Luckily, this twist does not seem to be present in the show given what's already happened, but basically, it turns out that Black Noir is secretly a Homelander clone. He was created with the whole purpose of being meant to take Homelander down if he ever lost control. The problem is, Homelander enjoyed being a puppet for Vought International, and that put Homelander in their good graces, so he never ended up going rogue. This made Black Noir incredibly frustrated, as that was his life's only true purpose and he had been denied it for years and years and years. So, in the final issues of The Boys, after slowly watching Homelander grow more and more insane, he finally snapped and attacked the White House, taking out the president. This finally gave Black Noir the go-ahead to finally do what he was finally made to do finally. He shows up to go to the White House in the 65th issue, reveals himself as a clone, and then goes for an absolute slogfest against the completely shocked Homelander. They quite literally rip each other to shreds, with Black Noir coming out technically on top before he stepped out onto the front lawn, missing significant chunks of his body. This is when the US military, alongside Billy Butcher, brought this insane soup to his brutal end with some final blows from Billy Butcher's crowbar and his fist.
Geist vs. Magneto has to be one of my favorite all-time short-lived and brutal villain versus villain fights. Though really, between them, it's pretty apparent that Geist is the real villain here, I think. Magneto ends up doing his best to catch Geist and ends up running into him after he escapes punishment in Terra Verde, in the late 80s Wolverine series. Magneto lures Geist out with a little mechanical toy and makes short work of him, while his fate isn't explicitly shown here, considering that Geist is a cyborg and Magneto is the master of magnetism, we can imagine how brutal this fight would be, yeah? And based on what we do see of what happens to the decoy robot toy I was talking about, it's probably not pretty whatever goes on off page.
And we aren't done with Spawn. This time we're going to issue number 322. Essentially, there was this vampire named Paul, and he had taken a girl and he had been keeping her in his house for years and years. He's truly pretty despicable, and Spawn doesn't let that kind of thing slide. Spawn's anger and rage made him so powerful that none of Paul's attempts to stop the Hellspawn even fazed him, and Al quickly incapacitated the vampire using a horrifying amount of bugs. When Paul comes back to, he is chained up and it has been 5 days since the vampire last fed. On top of that, Spawn had controlled some roaches to go inside of Paul and eat away at anything that was keeping him alive. So this guy is starving. Spawn then lets a mouse go down a very skinny hallway and informs Paul that along with the mouse there is even more food for him at the end of the hallway, and he can either go down it or stay where he is and be consumed by roaches. As you can imagine, Paul chooses the hallway, but Spawn had also removed all the spikes from his costume and put them on either side of said hallway, so Paul has to be torn to pieces if he wants to go to get to the other side, all while the bugs are coming after him. But when he finally forces his way through, Spawn is waiting there with Paul's mistreated dogs who have also not eaten in 5 days. Spawn gives Paul the key to the exit, which is back at the other end of the hallway covered in spikes and hungry insects, and needless to say, Paul doesn't make it through. Number 10, Blockbuster. Just like the video rental store that lives far off in a warm place in some of our memories, the villain of the same name, Blockbuster, met a very swift and some could say unjust end. Blockbuster may be a relatively unknown villain to some, and that may be due to the fact that he was primarily a Nightwing villain operating in Bloodhaven. In a tragic series of events, Blockbuster's mother passed away, and Blockbuster blamed this on Nightwing. He set out on a campaign to ruin the hero's life, attempting to take away anything and anyone that mattered to Dick Grayson instead of trying to hurt Nightwing himself. When Nightwing was at his absolute lowest in Nightwing 1996 number 93 from 2004, after a slog of a fight that moved out onto a fire escape, Nightwing had Blockbuster on the ropes when the new vigilante, Tarantula, showed up ready to bring Blockbuster to an end. Now, in a move I just did not see coming, Nightwing leaves his morals at the door, realizing Blockbuster will never stop, and he steps aside to allow Tarantula to end the villain's life. He then went and freaked the hell out while Tarantula started to seduce him. It was really weird, but it happened. Number 9, Spider-Man vs. Firelord. I think it is a well-known fact that Spider-Man pulls his punches. It's part of the reason he is one of the best heroes, but I always forget how much he actually pulls those punches. For example, in The Amazing Spider-Man issue 270, a black-suited Spider-Man puts one hell of a beating on a former Herald of Galactus, Firelord. Previously, Firelord had been wandering the cosmos when he stopped in New York to enjoy the culture, I guess, only to be attacked by firemen and then kicked in the face by Spider-Man. Now, the Lord of Fire wants his revenge. After leading Firelord on a merry chase through office buildings, Grand Central Station, the subway system, into a construction zone, having a building demolished on top of the fiery villain, and then leading him to a gas station which explodes, Spider-Man, at his wit's end, musters all his effort and his spider sense to lay an incredible beatdown of speed, agility, and raw strength on Firelord, getting so lost in his bloodlust until Captain America and the Avengers show up to be like, dude, you got him. Chill out. And in at number 8 is Deadpool vs. Bullseye. Reading through issue 11 of the 2008 volume of Deadpool just made me remember why I love Deadpool. Not that I forgot or anything, but man, he's just nuts, which makes it so good when the foe he faces is almost just as bonkers as he is. This time, it's Hawkeye, but not actually Hawkeye. It's actually Bullseye dressed as Hawkeye because this is happening during Dark Reign, and that's a long story on its own, which maybe we should do an attempt to explain of that at some point. For now though, Bullseye/Hawkeye has been contracted to take down Deadpool. In the last issue, he managed to get an arrow right through Mr. Pool's noggin. So, in this issue, Deadpool takes it out and his brain is still half regenerated as he tries to take on Bullseye at this meat farm. Now listening to his half-formed brain, Deadpool takes cover into a meat locker and decides his best course of action is to, quote, be the meat, and he suits up in a butchered pig, using it as makeshift armor. Wade charges Mr. I, who had conveniently run out of arrows, lands a good crack, rack, and a crock, and then takes a swift kick to the no man's land. The fight transitions to the kitchen where Bull's Hawkeye, or whatever you want to call him, comes at Wade with a buzzsaw, and Deadpool, wielding 2 meat hooks, trips, grips, and sends a hook straight through this fellow mercenary's chest. The dynamic between these two psychos is just a treat to read, but I'd honestly recommend just reading the whole of this volume of Deadpool itself. It's fantastic. Number 7. Storm and Emma Frost. A bit of a lesser known rivalry between 2 comic book characters is the one between Aurora Monroe, Storm of the X-Men, and Emma Frost, the White Queen of the Hellfire Club. Now back in the day, Emma was a villain more than anything else, and during Uncanny X-Men 151 and 152, the White Queen ambushed Storm using her telepathic powers to swap their bodies, and then enacted a plan for the Hellfire Club to attack the X-Mansion. Now after a whole lot of kerfuffle involving Kitty Pryde, Emma lost control of Storm's powers, and that gave Storm the opportunity to swap their minds back. Storm gets the tempest caused by Frost under control, then saves the White Queen from a massive fall, all heroic like, but being the villain, Emma tries yet again to attack Miss Monroe, prompting Storm to straight up smack Emma with a massive bolt of lightning. She flies up into the air, raging like the goddess she is, then flies back down, grabs Frost by the throat, and scares the hell out of her by almost taking her life, before Wolverine, of all people, talks her back to morality. It's fantastic. I love Emma Frost, but I think because of this, I love Storm a little bit more. Number 6. Kingpin vs. Grey Hulk. The Hulk is an interesting character. He's gone through many changes over time, even having different identities than just his regular green, savage, smashy smash one. One of his first, when he was still a Grey Hulk, would be Joe Fixit. Joe Fixit is a persona of the Hulk who is a relatively intelligent Las Vegas mob enforcer. It's great. Well, this year, in 2023, he got his own series. Fixit is specifically the enforcer for the Berengeti crime family, and in the series, Mr. Berengeti's operation becomes the focus of a certain Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin of Crime, who is planning to strong-arm a takeover. Problem is, you can't really strong-arm anything when one of the people you're facing off against is the Incredible Hulk. The best part about Joe Fixit is the fact that no one seems to be able to work out that he is just another version of the Hulk, so he is constantly underestimated. Within the first few moments of Kingpin's meeting with Mr. Berengeti, the plan he had goes south very quickly, and he decides to smash the man's desk, which is when Mr. Fixit enters the fray. Fisk's goon is slapped aside like a piece of unwanted salami, and then Fisk, who has gone toe-to-toe with Spider-Man, who, as we know from part 1 of this list, is usually holding back, comes bull-charging at Fixit, who obviously tanks 3 blows without flinching before grabbing Wilson's fist, hoisting the massive villain over his head, and then throwing him through the floor into the casino, and then picking him up and slamming him down into the floor again, and then holding his arm hostage until Fisk says that the meeting is over in English, then French, then Pig Latin. Priceless. And at number 5 is Batman vs. the Hyperclan. This point is eerily similar to the Manchester Black vs. Superman point on part 2 of Brutal Villain Defeats. In 1997's JLA, helmed by Grant Morrison, a team of superheroes shows up on Earth and begins fixing problems and completely eradicating supervillains, gaining popularity with the people that rivals the Justice League. The difference here is that this team of superheroes are actually white Martians. Unsurprisingly, the first of the Justice League to find this out was Batman himself, who managed to evade being captured unlike the rest of the League. Sneaking into the Hyperclan's base, he managed to lure one of their members, a mortal, who he strung up with a little batarang-held sign that read, "I know your secret." When 3 other members of the Hyperclan showed up, Batman brought them down with a single match and a circle of gasoline, turning their one weakness to fire into his greatest ally, because he's Batman. Number 4. Darkseid. Darkseid is not a character you mess with. He's incredibly powerful with an insanely capable mind, and the ability to practically never pass away. Sure, we could talk about his defeat at the hands of Batman, but that's kinda boring. Batman's a regular guy, sure, but he's also Batman. Batman. What we want to talk about is Volume 3, Issue number 2 and 3 of this comic called Superpowers. This comic was made to go along with the toy line, so we already should slightly suspend our knowledge of what various heroes and villains are actually capable of for right now. Now in the story, Darkseid's Omega effect had been dwindled to almost nothing thanks to Mr. Miracle, Tyr, and Mr. Freeze. After being betrayed by his people, he winds up teleporting to Earth with the last of his energy. Now, covered in a cloak, Darkseid is forced to rob a store just to find more clothes and remain unnoticed. But just after he does so, Darkseid is confronted by a pair of muggers in an alleyway. A pair of regular old human muggers who bully him, threaten him, and then knock him out cold with a chain just to rifle through his pockets and run off into the night. But the best part is how he looks up with a big Darkseid frown and goes, "Oh, surely my plight can sink no lower." You never see Darkseid like this, and certainly not in a fedora and a trench coat. Mwah. Number 3, Starro versus the Justice League. Despite how ridiculous the idea of a massive starfish-looking alien that can control minds is, Starro the Conqueror is still one of the Justice League's earliest and most dangerous foes. All the way back in the Brave and the Bold issue 28 from 1960 is our first ever introduction to Starro. Now this was before he used starfish facehuggers to control minds and instead would use a telepathic beam to control huge scores of people. When Starro did this to a town of people using one of his deputies, the Flash happened to take note of the fact that one kid, Snapper Carr, who was possibly the most annoying kid to grace the pages of comics, was immune to the effects of Starro's mental control. But it was a mystery as to why. It turns out that Snapper was covered in calcium oxide, aka lime, from when he was working on a lawn earlier in the day. Lime, used by oystermen to fight starfish off of their oysters, also happens to block the powers of Starro, curiously enough, and so Green Lantern grabs a bunch of barrels of the stuff from a nearby farm, and the Flash grabs bags and bags of it from a chemical warehouse, and they team up to proceed to absolutely cover Starro in lime, imprisoning the Conqueror in an unbreakable shell of lime. As it says in the comics, a living statue of lime. Number 2, Firestorm versus Parasite. Rudolph Jones found himself exposed to a strange form of radiation, which changed him into a bald, green-skinned parasite with the ability to absorb the life energy of others. Well, in Firestorm, the Nuclear Man, issue number 86, Parasite is released from an area he is being held in and goes on a rampage, draining multiple people of their life energy, including Firehawk, who fell pretty easily to this villain. Now luckily, the hero Firestorm is nearby. At this point in time, Firestorm has become the world's fire elemental and received a pretty significant power boost. Almost as if to prove this, Firestorm comes in hot on Parasite with a blast of flame, and then, when Parasite tries to drain Firestorm's power, the hero is completely unaffected as he says, quote, "My powers come not from myself, but from the earth. I don't have power, I am power." And in a last-ditch effort, Parasite decides to try and trade energy blasts with Firestorm. Now unfortunately for Parasite, it is nowhere near an equal fight. He uses up all of the energy he took from Firestorm, and then just trying to hold back Firestorm's blast, Parasite goes through his own reserved life energy until he is on the brink. Realizing he will lose, he begs Firestorm to stop, saying that Firestorm would bring the end for Parasite, to which Firestorm simply says, "That was my intention." Luckily for him, Parasite was saved by the allies of Firestorm who told him to stop, but this hero left Parasite emaciated from using up his own energy. And finally, and at number 1, is Joker versus the Red Skull. Now look, the Joker is a maniac, an absolutely insane criminal lunatic, but hey, he is an American criminal lunatic, goddamn. Which means dealing with someone with the past of the Red Skull is an absolute no-no. Yes, these two villains teamed up together in the Batman and Captain America Team-Up Special, back when DC and Marvel actually got along with each other. Naturally, these heroes' two greatest villains team up to take them on, but I guess it turns out that even Joker is above the morals of a World War II era war criminal. The Red Skull hires the Joker to steal an atomic doomsday device, which the Clown Prince of Crime totally agrees to do, until he sees Red Skull waltz out with a certain symbol front and center on his outfit, indicating his involvement in WW2, which is then confidently confirmed by the Red Skull. This is when the Joker delivers the line about being an American criminal lunatic, and the two simultaneously attack each other, Joker with his venom and the Red Skull with his quote dust of death, which they are both immune to. This is when Joker gets smacked over the back of the head with a wrench, but eventually the fight makes it onto a plane where the Joker overpowers Red Skull and they both go tumbling down through the sky alongside the atomic device they stole, destroying them both in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Now I don't know if I'm more shocked at Joker's switching of sides or the fact that they had a fist fight while straddling the top of an active fat boy. It could be either, I don't know.
Number 10. Isca loses in victory. I love this defeat because it happens in the form of a victory, which is pretty weird and pretty great. This takes place when Isca is challenged by the Fisher King to a battle of loss, in essence challenging Isca to see who has felt and experienced the most loss. In this way, the Fisher King kinda sneakily defeats Isca by making her step down from a direct battle after feeling the weight of all she has lost as a result of her powers. And the weird thing is, technically she wins the fight because she feels more loss, but in doing so she kinda loses in the way that the Fisher King wanted her to. While Isca's mutant power is to never lose, challenging her in this way basically ensures she will win. So having to feel and reflect on all the pain she has suffered and caused. As such, this causes Isca to leave Arakko, planet Arakko, unable to carry on, at least momentarily, in her fight against her fellow mutants, and causing her to step down from her place on the Great Ring, which many people feel she no longer deserved as someone who so deeply betrayed Arakko during their fight against Uranos. Even if it was, her own powers that compelled her to do so. And Isca's obviously done that before a few times. They were like, we're kinda over this. Especially when Isca just walks in and is like, well, I'm back. I'm also helping you guys run this, right? I can't deny that I would also be like, Isca, get out of here. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love devastating defeats, whoo, you will love our Invincible playlist because Invincible is full of devastating defeats. Devastating, brutal ones, so go check that out. Number 9. Karma comes for Alexander Luthor. Alexander Luthor is the one who pretty much set in motion the events of Infinite Crisis, a major mastermind behind it all. In the end, it only makes sense that from a hero standpoint, he would have to face, some kind of justice, because that's how these stories typically go. And while initially he seems to escape pretty unscathed, at the very end of Infinite Crisis issue number 7, we see him come face to face with Karma in the form of other villains, Lex Luthor and Joker of the main continuity. While Alexander seems to already kind of be in the process of putting together his next plan, he is accosted in an alley by the two villains and quickly defeated, with Lex asking him as he slowly bleeds out on the pavement, "Now who's stupid?" I'm gonna spoil it for you, it was Alexander Luthor. He's a stupid one, I think, is what Lex is getting at. It's like, it's not me, because now you're dead, so. Number 8. Thor goes for the head. This defeat is devastating in kind of a different way, because ultimately after the events of Avengers Infinity War, the Avengers are left without hope at the beginning of Avengers Endgame. Here, our heroes of the MCU go to face Thanos with the help of Captain Marvel. While they do succeed in locating him only 2 days after his fateful snap, which we all saw at the end of Infinity War, they still arrive too late. Thanos at this point has used the stones to destroy the stones. Not something you can do in the comics, but apparently something you can do in the MCU, leaving our heroes without any foreseeable way to bring back those they have lost, because they have no Infinity Stones to do that with. Frustrated, Thor strikes out against Thanos, cutting off his head with a single swing of Stormbreaker and ultimately defeating him. Even more devastating actually, because with Thanos dead, our heroes are then left without any actual leads on how they might, recover the stones and return those lost back to life. So it's a defeat, but it kind of is a defeat that leaves you going, well, now what? Number 7. Superboy Prime takes a toll. I love Superboy Prime, he's such a brutal villain. For this point, we are headed back to Infinite Crisis, where earlier on in the same issue as Alexander Luthor's death, Infinite Crisis issue number 7, Superboy Prime is fought against by Superman of the main continuity and Superman of the Golden Age, belonging to Earth 2. The Golden Age Earth 2. I think there's a few Earth 2s at this point. While Superboy Prime is eventually brought to his knees by the combined efforts of both Superman and the help of Mogo and the other Green Lanterns, the fight is an epic one that cost Golden Age Superman his life in the end, leaving Kara, Power Girl, all alone. Super sad. Truly, this is a really sad fight. Consequences. We love a fight with consequences. Number 6. Magneto crushes Tarn the Uncaring. Oof. In a way, some might see this fight as one between two villains. However, at the point in history that we're talking about here, the era of Krakoa and Planet Arakko, Magneto is not really a villain, and Tarn even is a bit ambiguous when it comes to his role and his alignment. Although I would say, at the very least, we could consider him to be an antagonist, and myself personally, I actually do consider him, in fact, to be a full-fledged villain, because Tarn is, well, he's a pretty evil guy. Based on my perception of these characters, I'm including Tarn's defeat here, so that's what we're doing today, friends. At one point, Magneto challenges Tarn to battle, being backed up by Isca, who's kinda tricked into supporting the fight against Tarn by Sunspot. Magneto manages to defeat Tarn in only a few pages, using his helmet both to disable Tarn's telepathic genetic manipulation abilities and then to crush his head. Yikes. Number 5. Wonder Woman takes a life. What have I learned from this story? Don't mess with Diana's friends or colleagues. Once more returning to the story of Infinite Crisis, but this time the beginning of it, the preamble. In issue number 219 of Wonder Woman, Diana is forced to fight against her longtime friend Superman, who is revealed to have been basically mind controlled by Maxwell Lord. Now when Diana realizes this, she heads straight for Lord, but Maxwell refuses to give up his control over Superman, promising Diana that at some point he will successfully manipulate Superman into killing Batman or Lois or even herself. She refuses to accept this, and while Lord is of course tied up with her lasso of truth, she demands that he tell her how to free Superman's mind from his influence, which obviously he's going to be compelled to tell the truth about that. Maxwell responds with simply 2 words, "Kill me." And surprisingly, Diana does just that, snapping his neck with her bare hands. Pretty surprising. Although I guess, you know, Wonder Woman is a warrior, so sometimes she do be killing people. Number 4. Professor X creates an even greater villain. Time to talk about Fatal Attractions. This is the famous X-Men crossover story arc where Magneto uses his magnetism powers to pull out all of the adamantium from Wolverine. Terrifying to behold, but it inspires a possibly even more horrifying reaction from the X-Men's mentor and teacher, Professor X, who snaps after seeing this happen to Logan. He uses his telepathic abilities to completely wipe Magneto's mind, taking away, as he says, his greatest weapons: his hatred, his ego, his nightmares, Magneto's mind! It's all gone! This would be the catalyst event that would set up Onslaught, a powerful psionic entity who would manifest as a result of the combined darker psyches of both Professor X and Magneto. A devastating defeat, therefore, in many ways, considering, you know, what it leads to much later. Onslaught, I feel like, just goes on forever. Number 3. Starro reminisces on happier times. Oh, this one is truly brutal and devastating for me because, in a way, Starro was quite a misguided villain. This is like heartbreakingly devastating. In James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, Starro is cast in the role of antagonist, but Starro is not malicious per se, or at least not malicious without, you know, cause. Starro is an alien who was captured and used for various experiments as part of Project Starfish. The Suicide Squad has been sent to basically shut down said project after the United States learned of how dangerous the project could be if unleashed on the world. When the team finally uncovers the truth behind Project Starfish, it's too late and they kinda accidentally unleash the captive, mind-controlling cosmic being Starro on the world, or at least on Corto Maltese. Amanda Waller is surprisingly fine with all this, as it will destabilize Corto Maltese, which actually benefits the US, so she's like, nah, that's cool. However, the squad decides to rebel against Waller because, I mean, there's a lot of destruction happening around them, a lot of innocent people being taken out, and they decide to take on Starro anyways. Thanks to a combination of commitment and luck, they manage to defeat Starro, but as they lay dying, Starro broadcasts their last thoughts, reminiscing on what their life was like prior to being taken captive on Earth, saying, "I was very happy, floating, staring at the stars." Sad last words. Number 2. Nova annihilates Annihilus. In Annihilation issue number 6, we see one of the most devastating villain defeats of all time. Or at least, you know, one of the most devastating methods of defeating a villain, I would say. It's happened a few times this way in the comics, actually, and each time it's still pretty devastating. Here we see this method used when Nova takes on Annihilus and defeats him by basically, like, ripping his spine out through his throat. What a way to go. I don't even know if we can actually show this one on YouTube. I don't even know if I could say that on YouTube, but I did, so I guess we'll see if it makes it in the cut. It's that devastating of a moment. Number 1. Peacemaker faces his dad. This one was a disturbing, heart-wrenching, and shocking moment from season 1 of Peacemaker, a series that surprised me in so many different and delightful ways. One such startling moment happens when Peacemaker is forced to face off against his dad, White Dragon. While we know pretty early on that Peacemaker's dad, Augie Smith, is pretty much the worst role model or parent anyone could ask for, we also see that Chris Smith, aka Peacemaker, still cares deeply for his father despite all the awful things his dad has done to him throughout his life. Rather than rightfully blame his father for his messed up upbringing, which honestly he should do, Chris seems to blame himself almost just as much, if not more, making the moment when he actually faces his father a pretty tense one. Years of pent-up rage, disappointment, shame, and frustration manifest in a single instant when White Dragon goads his son into killing him, commenting on the fact that he doesn't believe his son is in essence strong enough or man enough to even do so, and in the process causing Peacemaker to snap, pushing him past the brink and resulting in, well, Chris doing just that, killing his own supervillain father, pretty brutally too, so yeah.
In at 10, The Joker. Mad Love is one of the most beloved episodes of Batman the Animated Series, but the story of the episode was first told in the show's tie-in comic, The Batman Adventures. The story provides an in-depth look into Harley Quinn's origins and the full extent of her relationship with the Joker. After her anniversary plans end up being thrown out the window by Mr. J, she decides there's only one way to win her Puddin's affection: capture and kill Batman. And she succeeds, but the Joker isn't happy. If anyone's going to take Batman down, it's going to be him. And so he lashes out at Harley once again, leaving him alone with the Dark Knight. The two fight, but Batman's able to use Harley's successful scheme to his advantage, taunting the Joker that she came closer than he ever actually has to killing him, and concluding the jab by calling him Puddin, which is one of the funniest things I think Batman has ever done, because, you know, he's usually like a brooding and dark hero who refuses to kill despite all of his darkness, but I mean, like, come on. He called his greatest enemy by his girlfriend's pet name, and that's probably one of the best Batman moments ever, but it's still a stupid way to beat him, if we're all being honest. In at 9, Ultron vs. Thanos. Ultron vs. Thanos is an idea that we've been asking as comic fans for a while. However, this question was actually answered thanks to the Disney Plus series What If. In the 8th episode of season 1, we got to see what would have happened to the MCU if Ultron had won and gotten into the Vision's body. If the heroes had failed to steal it and put Jarvis's code inside, Ultron would have wiped out everything, apparently, using the Mind Stone and his vibranium body to decimate everything and everyone, until only he remained. However, it was certainly easier to do this after Thanos showed up with the other 5 Infinity Stones. We expected a climactic and epic battle, but instead, what we got was honestly pretty realistic. Ultron as Vision simply says fascinating and then uses his Mind Stone to slice Thanos in half, resulting in him collecting all the Infinity Stones at once, and then just ruining everything else, showing us that the worst mistake in the MCU was killing Vision before Thanos showed up. In at 8, Reverse Flash. A pride point for speedsters, especially evil speedsters, is how fast they can move, how they're faster than a speeding bullet, and how they're basically impossible to hit. So imagine our surprise when Reverse Flash ends up getting popped in the head by none other than Thomas Wayne in the Flashpoint timeline, so Barry could access enough speed force to save the world and bring his son back. Well, bring Thomas's son back. And while this apparently killed Thawne, that was far from it. Thawne started vibrating so fast as he could actually slow the destruction of his brain, and this actually gave Thawne more time to try and avoid death, and gave him the ability to hold the grudge. Humiliated by getting killed by Batman of all people, Thawne sets out to be even worse than usual, even ripping up the letter that Thomas gave Barry to give to Bruce, the only contact that Bruce had with his parents since they had died. Well, the only contact a living version had, which is absolutely brutal, okay? Batman was ugly crying. It was kind of weird. But I mean, come on, a speedster getting shot in the head, it's pretty dumb. And at 7, Thanos. Remember when Mysterio said, now that is an Avengers level threat? Well, luckily he didn't say that on Earth 57780, because on that Earth, home of the Super Spidey Stories number 39 from 1979, because In those pages, against the efforts of Hellcat and Spider-Man to thwart him, Thanos attempted to seize the Cosmic Cube. However, Hellcat intervened by kicking the cube out of Thanos' grasp, inadvertently sending it into an adjacent alley where a young child stumbled upon it. Despite Thanos' persistent attempts to reclaim it though, the two heroes successfully prevented his retrieval. Consequently, it comes as no surprise that a number of heroes have risen to oppose him. However, his most humiliating setback occurred when, in these pages, he was apprehended by the NYPD. That's right, the New York Police Department captured Thanos. This particular incident may have also attributed to the fact that Thanos was brazenly flying around New York City with a helicopter emblazoned with his name, so we kinda, knew that he was there, virtually just like inviting arrest. But still, Thanos was arrested and lost that way. What the hell? In its 6th, Darkseid. Bruce Wayne was not taken seriously by Darkseid. As a matter of fact, Batman uses the element of being underestimated to his greatest advantage. Batman does not kill, but he was forced to do so when Darkseid threatened Earth. The only known substance that can kill a new god is radion. So Batman shot Darkseid with a radion bullet and himself died in the process. Darkseid, for that matter, had Batman as the last person in mind that could stop him, because he thought if anybody would, it would be Clark. So yeah, up until this point, the only human or sentient being, for that matter, that had truly made Darkseid, the god of evil of the DC universe, cowering and running away in fear is Batman. So yeah, there you go. Batman killed Darkseid by shooting him. Halfway through, into number 5, Squirrel Girl versus Galactus. Okay, I know you all love Squirrel Girl, but come on. I get that there's a whole series called The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, but this deserves to be on the list. This is a little much. The solo series debuted in January of 2015 and ran for 8 issues, but then was relaunched in October of that same year as part of Marvel's all new, all different branding, and was continued to be published until November of 2019 with 50 issues, for a total of 58. Both series were written by Ryan North, but in issue number 4 of volume 1, Squirrel Girl literally stops Galactus from coming to Earth by being friends with him. Come on, okay? You can't sit there typing telling me that this doesn't make this deserving of that list, okay? Like, she didn't even have to fight him, for God's sakes. Okay, that's stupid. You're just gonna talk the Devourer of Worlds into not devouring a world? What? No, that's not how that works. The waiter at Olive Garden can't stop me from shoving more bread down my throat, so how could you stop someone who's literally eating planets? And like, I get that you all love Squirrel Girl, but come on. I know that suggesting anything is gonna make people mad at me, but still, Squirrel Girl beating Galactus. No. Okay? No. It's nuts. In it for Justice League. The Justice Buster Batsuit is a mech suit that's part of Batman's Fenrir Contingency, which is a suit designed to take down the entirety of the Justice League. Making its feature appearance in Batman Endgame, the Joker used his virus to warp the brains of the Justice League members at the beginning of the plot. Batman was then forced to use his Fenrir protocol to eliminate his teammates before it was too late. The suit was successful in eliminating Wonder Woman, the Flash, and Aquaman, but met an even match at the hands of Superman. After a lengthy fight, they were trading blows. Superman tore through the armor and nearly killed Bruce, which would have been realistic. Until Bruce used, and I kid you not, kryptonite chewing gum to spit in Clark's face, rendering him unconscious. Come on. Okay? Like, imagine waking up to learn that you passed out because Batman spit in your face. Like, seriously, dude, please. Like, I get that we're post-COVID, but like, this wasn't post-COVID, okay? He literally kept a piece of chewing gum in his mask. He says that he keeps it in the helmet so that he can chew it and then spit it like Clark. Dude, like, okay, sure, you had miniaturized red suns on your knuckles, you had Greek supernatural weaponry, you had super fast servers and electromagnetic nerve trees for Flash, but chewing gum is the thing that takes Superman down. That's like Green Lantern being taken down by a number 2 pencil. Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Cobalt Blue. While in the comics Malcolm Thawne is the long-lost twin brother of Barry Allen, he is also Cobalt Blue, one of a number of evil speedsters of the Flash that wielded the blue flame. In the Arrowverse, however, Cobalt Blue is Eddie Thawne, who's brought back to life by the Negative Speed Force in order to make him their avatar. Spoiler alerts for the series finale of The Flash, by the way. Okay, you've had enough time. To erase the Reverse Flash from the timeline, timeline, Eddie shoots himself in the heart as he is a direct ancestor of the speedster. His death created a paradox since Eddie did not leave behind any children to continue the Thawne name. So Eobard, aka the Reverse Flash, is never born. The paradox though also caused a wormhole to open up and start expanding, pulling Eddie's body into it. Then in the final season, it is later revealed that Eddie was resurrected by the negative Speed Force in 2049 to become its new avatar. He originally worked as a scientist at Mercury Labs known as Malcolm Gilmore until he was struck by a red lightning bolt from the negative Speed Force, mimicking Barry's origin story. However, the way his storyline ends, again, Flash season finale spoilers, is by Barry convincing him to let go of the hate and remaining the negative Speed Force avatar. They also have a climactic battle with all of the past speedster villains that lasts like 2 minutes and then they all disappear. So yeah, Barry literally beats the negative Speed Force talking to Eddie. God. I love the Flash, but come on, jeez. Penultimately, and at number 2, musical. And no, this isn't about Mxyzptlk, because within the pages of Final Crisis, utilizing her legendary lasso of truth, Wonder Woman releases Darkseid's consciousness from Turpin's body, and despite being physically defeated, Darkseid's dying essence continues to drag the entirety of reality towards annihilation. Time and space crumble as the catastrophic effects intensify until only Superman remains. Engulfed in darkness at the culmination of existence, he struggles to replicate a machine known as the Miracle Machine, an apparatus that's capable of granting wishes, which had been revealed to him by Brainiac 5 during his journey to the future. Darkseid's essence resurfaces, coveting the machine, but Superman ultimately obliterates him by employing his last reserves of superpowered breath to emit a harmonious song, countering the vibrational frequency of Darkseid's life force, ensuring his ultimate demise. Yeah, Superman sang Darkseid to death, and if that's not stupid, I don't know what is. And finally, into number 1, Batman vs. Hulk. Talk about one-sided fights, right? Okay, like Batman standing up to Superman is one thing. They're within the same universe, he can get kryptonite, he's rich, I get it. Shockingly enough, Batman seemingly achieved the impossible feat of defeating the Hulk as well in the days of 1981 when DC and Marvel were still on friendly terms and the concept of separate universes hadn't really established yet. They occasionally collaborated on crossover stories, such as what unfolded in DC Special Series number 27. Written by the late Len Wein and illustrated by Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, in this extraordinary encounter, Batman unexpectedly crosses paths with a rampaging Hulk, who had been manipulated by the Joker to see Batman as an adversary. So, the Hulk saw Batman and, kinda got mad and attacked him because, adversary. So, Batman, recognizing his immense power, somehow evaded every single one of Hulk's blows because even one of them would kill him instantly. And then, somehow, with calculated precision, he drops a pellet of knockout gas, which disoriented Hulk, and then somehow, Batman kicked the Hulk in the stomach, which made him inhale the gas that then knocked him out. So yeah, that's right, Batman kicked the Hulk in the gut and actually made him flinch so bad he had to inhale inhaling gas that made him pass out. Yeah, that's also pretty damn stupid, but I'm not sure.
Number 10, the Thing is crushed by Dr. Doom's hand. The Ultimatum storyline from Marvel Comics kinda got a bad rep, mainly because it's super dark and had some seriously brutal moments. But one of the craziest scenes was when Dr. Doom, who's usually a big deal in the Marvel Universe, he got his face absolutely obliterated in the palm of the Thing's hand. So how did it go down? Well, Dr. Doom did something pretty awful that set off a huge catastrophe, leading to a slew of unalivings, including some of the Fantastic Four crew. Now, the Thing, who's not usually the trigger-happy type, got seriously ticked off by all this. And so what does he do? He grabs Dr. Doom's head in his palm and squishes it like a stress ball. That's not really your average superhero move, but when you think about all the damage that Doom caused, you kind of get why the Thing lost it. I mean, it's a shocking moment in comic book history. The Thing usually doesn't go around squishing heads, but this time he definitely did. Ultimatum may not be everyone's cup of tea, but this definitely left a mark with that hardcore Thing moment. At number 9, Manuki gets roasted. The Punisher, in his quest against crime boss Ma Nuki, went to extreme lengths. Ma Nuki, who was determined and relentless, despite losing all her limbs to a polar bear, met a brutal end. You see, after the Punisher took down her criminal network, he confronted her in a fiery showdown to say the least. And so in a final clash, Ma Nuki lunged at the Punisher without any limbs. It's pretty interesting to see. But Frank Castle didn't hold back, pushing her back into a raging fire. Now, the details of her fate weren't shown, but I mean, burning alive is a horrific way to go. The intense heat and flames would have caused some excruciating pain, making her last moments unimaginably agonizing. This villain's defeat stands out for its raw brutality, showcasing the Punisher's uncompromising stance against those he deems as threats to justice. The scene, although not super graphically depicted, leaves a super haunting impression of the price paid in battle against crime. If you're enjoying this video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. Coming in at number 8, Taskmaster and Hyperion obliterate each other. Okay, so Taskmaster is like a human sponge. I mean, not in the way you would think, but I mean, in both ways in this case. You see, he can soak up fighting moves just by watching them, which is what makes him super dangerous in the Marvel world. But he's not somebody with magical powers like Thor. He's just got something even scarier: the willingness to do whatever it takes to win. And in a recent showdown, Taskmaster faced off against Hyperion, who's basically one of Marvel's versions of Superman, which sounds like an impossible feat. Am I right? I mean, Hyperion is super tough, I mean, basically indestructible. But guess what? Taskmaster found a way to beat him, and he did so by getting his own ass beat really hard. You see, at first, Taskmaster was getting absolutely crushed. Bones were breaking, organs were being bruised, bodily fluids spattered all over the place. It was a total mess. It seems every trick in Taskmaster's book was just shrugged off by Hyperion. But ultimately, taking this beating paid off for Taskmaster, as Hyperion completely underestimated him when he ignored an arrow that, to his credit, it missed him by a mile. But as it turns out, that arrow was tipped with Argonite radiation, basically Hyperion's kryptonite, and the arrow actually turned back around like a boomerang and struck the unsuspecting super blonde right in the back. When Hyperion got hit, he screamed in pain, fell down, and here's the scary part. Hyperion was basically done for, like the mission was complete, and all Taskmaster had to do was walk away. But he didn't walk away. He went full-on savage, beating the guts out of the depowered Hyperion, ready to take him out completely. And if it weren't for Nick Cage yelling through his intercom, he totally would have done it too. It took Nick Cage reminding Taskmaster that he's supposed to be professional and not end this guy in cold blood. That's how ruthless Taskmaster could be though. I mean, he's beaten big shots before, but taking down Hyperion, even if it almost killed him, shows just how deadly this guy truly is. Heroes better not take him lightly or they might just end up regretting it big time. At number 7, the Joker caves Simon's skull in. You know that unpredictable maniacal clown who's always keeping everybody on their toes? Well, he's known for some pretty wild antics, but this one really took the cake in terms of sheer brutality. So Simon, this telekinetic and telepathic baddie from the Teen Titans series, was causing his usual chaos. But then, in Salvation Run number 2, things took a really dark and gruesome turn, as the Joker, in his usual twisted manner, decided to put an end to Simon, and let's just say it was not a peaceful resolution. See, the Joker went full-on ruthless, grabbing a rock and violently caving in Simon's skull. Yeah, you heard that right. It was seriously graphic and intense, even by Joker standards. This is coming from a guy who's literally skinned people alive before. The moment wasn't just shocking because it was the Joker, it was just the sheer level of brutality that left readers stunned. This is one of those jaw-dropping scenes that really makes you grasp how twisted and unpredictable the Joker can truly be when he's pushed to the edge. At number 6, Wolverine dismembers a Sabertooth clone. You're not gonna believe the crazy battles that went down in this one. Picture this. So Wolverine, the tough-as-nails mutant with those claws, is facing off against a clone of Sabertooth, villain known for being downright ruthless. This clone was no joke. It went on a full-on rampage and actually took out Feral, one of Wolverine's crew. So now that Wolverine was armed with the Murasama blade, which is basically a superhero's dream weapon for taking down the unkillable, Wolverine stepped up, and let me tell you, he did not hold back. With one swift move, he sliced off the clone's arm, and then, like a lightning bolt, he went for the head and chopped it clean off. But here's the thing, see, Wolverine wasn't about to take any chances. Even though Sabertooth was taken out with the Murasama blade, which basically renders him unable to regenerate, Logan still made sure to bury every single piece of that clone separately. Some next level caution right there. But just when he thought he'd finished off Sabertooth, the original popped back up, which was a surprise twist in the story. Wolverine must have been scratching his head thinking that he put the villain down for good, but nah, these comic book folks always find a way to bounce back. At number 5 was the comic book moment where Wonder Woman took down Maxwell Lord. This one is intense and brutal. So here's how it went down. Superman, under mind control, goes berserk, thinking his loved ones are in danger, but as it turns out, Maxwell Lord is pulling the strings. Wonder Woman steps up and wrangles Lord in her lasso of truth. Now here's the kicker. Lord spills the beans that the only way to free Superman's mind is to off him. And that's when Wonder Woman, with no time dilly-dallying, does the unthinkable, snapping Lord's neck. Pretty heavy stuff. No flashy speeches or grandstanding, just a swift execution with serious consequences. This scene caused quite a stir in the comic world for its shock value and for Wonder Woman's quite uncharacteristic move. It's one of those moments that makes you stop and think about the lengths that heroes might go to when backed up against the wall. At number 4, Sentry rips Carnage in half. So Carnage is one of the baddest of the bad guys in the Marvel Universe, causing all kinds of chaos in his Supermax prison. The guy was all set to go on a rampage, targeting Spider-Woman, Luke Cage, Spider-Man, Daredevil, Captain America, the whole lot. Now that's an all-star team of superheroes, but then things get really messy when in swoops the Sentry. Now the Sentry is no ordinary hero. He's got crazy powers, like next level stuff. Basically, yet another one of Marvel's Superman equivalents. So what does he do? He doesn't waste any time with punches or speeches, none of that. He just grabs Carnage, flies them both up into space, into the great atmosphere up there, and then, once he's up there, when it's just him, Carnage, and the stars, Sentry does the unthinkable. Just tears Carnage apart, quite literally, like a scene out of a sci-fi horror flick. You see, Carnage has a symbiote suit which gives him insane powers, making him almost unkillable, but when you're up against the power of a guy like the Sentry, someone who's got the strength of a zillion suns, well, let's just say it's game over for Carnage. The symbiote couldn't handle that kind of cosmic level power, and just like that, one of the nastiest villains ever meant a seriously brutal end. At number 3 is Daniel West getting nuked. Reverse Flash, aka Daniel West, wasn't your regular bad guy. He had his super speed going on just like the Flash, but he used his powers for all the wrong reasons. I mean, imagine going up against your own grandpa. That's some next level family drama right there. Now the Suicide Squad, known for recruiting not so good guys for their missions, thought it would be good to try to turn him into a hero, but alas, their plan didn't exactly pan out. So here comes the big showdown. There's this bomb planted by the League of Assassins set to destroy a whole city. And here's when Reverse Flash steps in, thinking that he can be the hero this time. He swoops in, saves the day by getting rid of the bomb, but then tragedy strikes as the thing blows up when he's holding it, and he's caught in the blast, ending his villainous run right then and there in the middle of the ocean. At number 2, the Void gets ripped in half by Null. Alright, now it's the Sentry's turn to get ripped in half. Lots of ripping in half in this one. Alright, so the Sentry, a hero with a split personality, kind of like Jekyll and Hyde, but with superpowers. On one side, he's the good old hero, the Sentry, and on the other, he's the Void, a real cosmic level problem when the story calls for it. Now, things got really wild when these two sides joined forces and became a serious problem, but enter Null, the big shot symbiote god. Null and the Sentry had a clash where Null managed to pull off something straight out of an ironic playbook as he actually ripped the Void himself in half. This wasn't the first time Void would bite the dust like this, but it seems like this time it actually stuck. What's interesting here is how the Sentry, who was once a huge multiversal threat and later became a super strong Avenger, but this defeat by Null is the kind of comic book stuff that sticks around. It's like Null was like, oh, you're into tearing things in half? How about I show you how it's done? At number 1 is Reverse Flash evaporated by Dr. Manhattan. Eobard Thawne, aka Reversed Flash from the DC Universe, is no stranger to biting the dust, having died and being resurrected more times than anybody can count. At this point, it's just been chopped up to his time traveling antics, rendering him a living paradox. But his demise in the Button storyline takes the cake. Picture this. He shows up in Batman's cave, zapped by a blue light while holding his, weird Watchman button from the comics, and then he vanishes. Seconds later, he reappears, no button, and collapses. His body starts vaporizing on the spot, leaving only a skeleton, muttering about seeing God before biting the big one. Now the thing is, Reverse Flash thought he hit the jackpot by touching that button, hoping for some power or connection, but as it turns out, it was linked to Dr. Manhattan, the big shot from the Watchmen, who zapped him into a crisp in an attempt to remain undiscovered within the DC universe. The whole ordeal with the button bridged the Watchmen world and the DC universe together, and poor Eobard over here became a crispy critter in the cosmic crossover. Pretty brutal.
But coming in at number 10 is Jack Frost. When Jimmy Olsen was on a game show back in the Silver Age series Superman's Pal Jimmy Olsen number 33, a special prism appeared randomly in a garbage dump that, for some reason, turned the thoughts of the game show contestants into reality. Just go with it, it's a comic book, okay? So, when Jimmy answered a game show question with Jack Frost, that's exactly who appeared. Jack Frost, as a villain, threatened to plunge the world into a new ice age. Now I'm sure that's not at all what Jimmy had in mind, but luckily he is Superman's pal, so what was Superman's solution? Simple. He would just go fly into space and move the frickin' sun closer to the Earth. Not only is this an absolutely ridiculous feat, which is theoretically completely impossible, but it was incredibly embarrassing looking for Jack Frost, who had to run away from Superman, who was essentially chasing the freezing villain with the sun. Once Jack Frost had retreated into a deep, cold cave, Superman put the sun back where he got it so it didn't destroy the Earth. The bonkers part about this is that he did all this nonchalantly as if he was moving furniture. Number 9. Hank Henshaw. After Superman's infamous death at the hands of Doomsday and his not exactly surprising return to life, Superman had to clean up the messes made in his absence, including some imposter Supermen. One of which would be the cyborg Superman, Hank Henshaw, that took over the role of Superman in his place. This cyborg wasn't really doing a great job with his Supermaning, and I think most would agree that he was really tarnishing the name of Superman. Because he was. Hank ruined Soup's memorial, and more importantly, he had just blown up Coast City, taking the life of millions of people. Now, when Superman actually returns from the dead, he doesn't have his powers back just yet, so the conflict actually lasts a little while. But once Superman gets his powers back, you best believe he beats this sucker, and in one page no less. Hank is a cyborg, like I said, so Superman ends this guy by simply punching him straight through the chest and then using his super speed to shake him so fast his screws come loose and he just straight up falls apart. Superman shook this sucker to death. Number 8. The Marquis of Death. In 2009's Fantastic Four number 566, Dr. Victor Von Doom reveals to us and his people that he had learned almost everything he knows from one incredibly powerful reality warping villain called the Marquis of Death. With his master now on his way to see how Dr. Doom had fared as ruler over the Earth. Only, when the Marquis shows up with his mysterious new apprentice, he was less than happy with the progress Doom had made on Earth, and to punish his old apprentice, he attacks. The Marquis completely warped reality, making Doom think he had actually won the fight, and then snatched the victory away, set him on fire, turned his heart to stone and his blood to acid, and then sent him back in time to the Pliocene age to be eaten by megalodons. Do you realize how insane that sentence is on its own? That should be the point right there. But over the course of the rest of the story, the Marquis goes on to fight the Fantastic Four, almost beating them. But he is brought to a point of nearly being beaten, which is when, out of nowhere, his apprentice, the new one, shows up and slaps and destroys this reality warping villain, but not before revealing that he is actually Dr. Doom himself. Apparently, Dr. Doom survived being eaten by megalodons and being turned to stone and his blood to acid, gained enough power and dark magic to completely change his form, became the Marquis' new apprentice, even defeating Uatu the Watcher so he wouldn't be discovered, and he did all of that to hide in plain sight to get his revenge and finally defeat the Marquis of Death. If you guys are enjoying this list so far, make sure you check out the rest of the channel for parts 1 to 3 and maybe subscribe while you're there so you don't miss part 5 and all the rest of our comic book loving content. Thank you. In at number 7 is the Superman Revenge Squad. After After discovering the planet of the Superman Revenge Squad, Superman wastes no time at all and charges at the planet with a full frontal assault armed with nothing but his abilities and a strange package attached to his chest. The Revenge Squad fires all their most dangerous, most powerful weapons at Superman, firing everything they think will take out the Man of Steel. They all impact on Kal-El, and the villains think they've won. For a moment. But when the dust settled, they didn't even leave a scratch. Instead, the package on Superman's chest detonated, encircling the whole planet in a layer of mist. Now, Superman then yells down to the villains from the heavens, explaining if any of them pass through the mist leaving the planet, they will suffer total amnesia, forgetting any hatred they have for Superman. They can remain trapped on their base, being angry and upset, or they can rejoin the cosmos devoid of all grudges. Either way, he doubts he will ever see them again, and then he just flies on back home. And in at number 6, Simon. Simon Jones is a villain of the Teen Titans who has vast telekinesis and telepathic powers, and he is also the leader of the Fearsome Five. All of that, but he basically just calls himself Simon. But cool because there's a P in front of it, so we know that he is a psychic dude, I guess. Cool. In Salvation Run number 2, Simon is among the new Injustice League when a bunch of villains, including them, get exiled to an alien world. Simon, who is standing among some pretty big name villains, attempts to convince his fellow supervillains that escape is impossible, and so he then proceeds to lay down plans for beginning a new civilization, involving all the female villains getting pregnant and giving birth as soon and as frequently as possible. But luckily, the Joker is also here, and he doesn't seem to be a fan. Joker very, very abruptly interrupts Simon, tossing a rock that hits the guy square in the noggin, and then running up and smashing Simon over the head repeatedly with a rock, assuming control. Number 5, Captain Boomerang. This brutal defeat is so quick and so abrupt, there isn't even much I can really say about it other than you should never put a captain up against a general. In 2016 Suicide Squad, in literally the second issue, Task Force X are sent on a mission to Russia to retrieve or destroy an unknown device. Well, turns out that the device is actually a portal to the Phantom Zone. Rather than leave it be, which would probably have been smart, Captain Boomerang approaches the portal and is almost instantly incinerated down to his ankles by none other than General Zod, using his heat vision. I doubt the Boomerang guy would have been able to help much in the squad's fight against Zod, and honestly it's a miracle any of them survived at all, but I never expected this to happen so abruptly and to one of the main members of the squad. And in at number 4 is Mr. Mxyzptlk. The villain known as Mr. Mxyzptlk is both incredibly powerful, but he also doesn't really do anything that bad. He's usually just a big old nuisance. In Superman Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, a whole bunch of Superman's villains all make their play on the Man of Steel, and when their threat is ended, Superman is still left wondering why the heck this is all happening, when he realizes the only villain that wasn't among them was the 5th dimensional imp himself, which is when he finally reveals himself. He goes on about how, being completely immortal, he gets really bored. He spent 2,000 years just floating around doing nothing, and then 2,000 years doing good deeds and being nice, and then he spent 2,000 years being a mischievous little imp, and now, of all times, he decides he's gonna start being evil, and his first evil act is to kick off the next 2 millennia, well, by taking out Superman. That's basically what he says. But I don't think it was like that. Anyways, Mr. Mix reveals his horrendous true form and goes on the attack. Unfortunately, Superman's girl Lois Lane figured out what to do. Superman grabbed the Phantom Zone projector, and as he was about to use it on this magical imp, Mr. Mix spoke his name backwards, which would return him back to the 5th dimension. Unfortunately, this happened simultaneously, and Mxyzptlk was torn in half between both the Phantom Zone and the 5th dimension. And apparently Superman did this completely on purpose, and then he runs off to go and sulk about it. Number 3, Dinosaurus. The Viltrumites from the Invincible comic series are a race of near invulnerable, incredibly strong, world-conquering aliens, but none among them stands as strong and as invulnerable as Grand Regent Thrag. Battle-hardened over thousands of years, only the most powerful characters characters can even hope to stand mano a mano against this powerhouse. David Anders, the villain known as Dinosaurus, is not one of those characters. While Dinosaurus is very strong, it's more so his intelligence that is his greatest weapon. Dinosaurus allied himself with Invincible around issue 90 of the comic, and in an attempt on Mark's life by Thrag, Dinosaurus comes to Invincible's aid, which he had to know would not go well. Dinosaurus attacks Thrag, but his claws shatter like glass on Thrag's skin. Thrag then proceeds to pummel Mr. Anders, only stopping when he was distracted by an explosion. This brief moment of pause gave Dinosaurus the chance to chomp on the Grand Regent's head, but unfortunately, just like his claws, Dino's teeth also completely shatter, not even leaving a scratch on Thrag, which gives Thrag the chance to first mock the guy, but then break his jaw and leave him to think about his mistake. And in at number 2 is Vulcan. In recent years, the red planet that was formerly known to us as Mars has become home to a group of mutants known as the Iraqi, who renamed the planet to Arakko. These mutants differ from the Krakoan mutants we know by years and years of a constant battle for survival. Because of that, the Iraqi are a warlike people. They despise weakness and take on almost any challenge as a means of strengthening themselves. Because of this, duels and challenges are a key part of Iraqi society. Now, the Iraqi are ruled by a group called the Great Ring of Arakko, which is made up of almost completely Omega level mutants. One of those mutants is an incredibly disliked guy by the name of Tarn the Uncaring. Now another Omega level mutant who is also pretty unliked by a lot of people is a guy by the name of Gabriel Summers, aka Vulcan, who wields massive energy manipulation abilities, which he can use to take away mutant powers. The problem is, Tarn's ability is also to take away mutant powers. As part of a big convoluted plan, Vulcan challenged Tarn for his seat on the Great Ring of Arakko, which all comes to a head in X-Men Red issue 3 from 2022. Just as the fight begins, both mutants simultaneously negate each other's powers, turning their fight into a straight up physical altercation. At first, Vulcan gets in a few good hits. Meaning 2. He gets 2 hits. But he didn't seem to take Tarn's face tentacles into account, one of which catches Vulcan's fist, allowing Tarn to land a face-shattering punch. He then grabs Vulcan's arm with one hand and completely snaps it, then slams his face into the Coliseum floor and crushes it with 3 swift punches, winning the fight. And in at number 1 is Tarn the Uncaring. Ooh, surprise! You thought that was the end of the story. Well, nope. Right after Tarn has turned Vulcan into a floor decoration, he celebrates his win, exclaiming that he is unkillable and asking who will challenge him now. And to his surprise, someone answers. You see, another powerful mutant who is also hanging out on Arakko is none other than Magneto, who has been featured a few times in this series. Magneto comes floating into the Coliseum with his helmet and calls Tarn a stain on the planet, challenging the recently victorious mutant whose psychokinetic power-stealing abilities have now returned. But if you think that will put Magneto at a disadvantage, you are sorely mistaken. Iraqi combatants are allowed to use weapons outside of their powers, and like I said, Magneto had his helmet, which, if you are unaware, blocks mental powers. Before Tarn even finishes his sentence to accept the challenge, Magneto uses his metal-controlling powers to slam his helmet onto Tarn's head, blocking his powers from being used, and then, in one swift move, he crushes the helmet and Tarn's head like a can of pop. It's so fast and so ruthless, and it's the most badass moment I have ever seen. Mwah. Beautiful. 10 more villains brought lower than ever before. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. I've been Adam Andrews, this is Top 10 Nerd, and until next time, I'll catch you on the flippy flop. Keep it real out there, nerds. Bye.